Codependency is not about controlling others. It's about not loving yourself enough. Growing up without consistent love or safety teaches your nervous system that abandoning yourself is loving others. So, as an adult, you're unconsciously drawn to people who feel familiar, even when they're harmful. So, if you're ready to stop abandoning yourself, learn to love yourself more, and create healthy, lasting relationships, this episode is for you. Welcome to Restoring Resilience. Well, hello, Ross. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Restoring Resilience podcast.
Well, thank you for this is our second time in just a couple months, and I'm hoping that this one is even more fun than the first one.
Yeah, we did. We had a great conversation. And I'm very excited to talk to you today. We're talking about some of your book, The Codependency Revolution, which I would say that you revolutionized the concept of codependency, which we totally really dove into in a conversation we had when I was on your podcast. And I'll link that in the show notes as well. But I think this is such an important place to start because codependency is used so much. And it's often used with this negative connotation, like something must be wrong with me, maybe because I'm codependent, maybe I'm part of the problem. I think especially people in narcissistic relationships can blame themselves and think, maybe this is partly me, and then stay stuck. So I think we should just start by unraveling this term codependency and then tell us why you actually renamed codependency self-love deficit disorder.
Well, codependency from the very beginning, and my career started around 1988, it never really had substance or a backbone. It always seemed to be what someone else thought it was, or to fit what they wanted it to fit. And so I did a little research, and I found out that originally the term came from this idea of a partner of an alcoholic. It was created for a very good reason, because back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, in alcohol treatment programs, they were not including the partner of the alcoholic, and they found that that partner had a role in the dysfunction. And so, without treating that person, the alcoholic would go home from treatment and go right back into the old family system, which would put pressure on him or her to act out or drink again. And so with the term co-alcoholic, or in other words, a co-addict, that opened up a new way of thinking about this type of person. And then in the 80s, there was an umbrella term called chemical dependency created, and all alcohol and drug treatment programs kind of fell under that. It just made sense because alcohol is a drug. And then that term became co-chemically dependent and was shortened for codependent. And that is why there are people that still use the word codependence, and there's a dash. And if you go to Codependency No More, excuse me, if you go to the 12-step Codependence Anonymous, there's a dash. Is they never got away from that thinking that it's the partner of the dependent person. But in reality, it's far from that. So in the 1980s, specifically 1986, Melody Beattie expanded the word in her famous book, Codependence No More, or Codependent No More, and has written many books and very helpful, groundbreaking books. And she expanded it, but she still kept the basic partner of the addict definition. And if you talk to someone who goes to Al-Anon, which is where partners of alcoholics go with their TULSA program, the problem with the addict or the alcoholic is they're trying to control the alcoholic, trying to get them to stop drinking. Well, they can't stop someone who's not going to be able to stop themselves. So the primary focus is on controlling others. So codependency started with this idea that it's about controlling others, which is furthest from the truth. And so I had to come up with another way to explain it. And being a psychotherapist, a clinician, I wanted to hold it to the standard of any mental health disorder. And all disorders are defined specifically in one of two manuals, either the DSM or the ICD. And it's a very streamlined definition. And then they have symptoms that the person must have in order to qualify for the diagnosis. So I created a very simple definition. And I created that a long time ago. A codependent is a person who gives almost all the love, respect, caring, trust, and protection in a relationship with hopes that it's reciprocal, but it's not, and they stay in the relationship. That's it. That accounts for all codependence. And then I came up with this idea that codependency, or as I understand it, codependency, most people were talking about the symptoms, not the primary problem, which is the distribution of love, respect, trust, protection, and caring. I just messed up those letters, but all of them are there. And I realized that there are personality types. People were confusing the personality with the problem. So there's a passive codependent, the active codependent, the cerebral codependent, the anorexic codependent, but all of them fit the diagnostic description of someone giving all the love, respect, care, trust, and protection and not getting it in return. And from there, I eventually decided I have to change the word itself. The word itself is just it's a dinosaur. And that is when I came up with the term self-love deficit disorder. Every codependent I know or knew had problems with self-love, problems with shame, loneliness, and could not really love themselves. And that, to me, was the basis of the problem. If you solve the self-love deficit, then you create the solution, the self-love abundance. And those people don't want to be in these relationships with narcissists who keep giving everything and receiving so little.
Right. No, they don't. And thank you for explaining that history there, because I think that helps us make a lot of sense of it and why codependency is often associated with wanting to control somebody else, which I think
Mhm.
is just like when clients, say I think I'm codependent, I cringe when I hear the term because I know that oftentimes they're using it in that framework of they don't see it as a self-love deficit, that that's really what it
Mhm.
is, that they need to create more self-love and self-worth. They think that, oh, I have a problem controlling somebody else.
Mhm.
And when
No,
you,
no,
yeah,
there is
go ahead.
there is a personality type that does control people too much, but that's just one of many personality types.
Yeah. And a lot of times for the people that I'm working with, narcissistic abuse survivors, if they end up telling the narcissist, or a therapist, perhaps well intended says, I think that you're codependent because you're putting so much energy into trying to make this relationship work or trying to make sense of it, not knowing that they're with a narcissist, then the partner or person goes home and thinks, oh, I've
Mhm.
got a control problem. I've got to stop trying to control them so much. And you tell a narcissist that, and you're going to be gaslighted even more.
Well, and that's one of the reasons I completely gutted Codependency Anonymous is because they use the old definition as the basis of their 12 steps.
Yeah.
And in every 12-step program, it starts with the definition of the addiction, of being powerless over it. I am powerless over alcohol. Because of that, my life's unmanageable. I'm powerless over gambling, et cetera, et cetera. Well, they decided that the primary addiction for codependence or codependency is controlling people. And the sad reality is, as you said, gaslighting, they are the victim of control. They are
Yeah.
the victim of gaslighting, the victim of abuse, the victim of neglect, coercion, and all sorts of harm. And the term and the belief that they control others is a part of systemic gaslighting that impacts any person who wants to get help. Because if they find out they're the problem, well, that's what they're just that's feeding into the problem. They're trying to escape that.
And that's why I think a lot of times survivors end up staying stuck even more because they tell other people about the relationship and then they get those kinds of things back. Like, well, this is a relationship issue. Nobody's perfect. You got to
Right.
try to make it work. So for your understanding, you kind of took the codependency, stripped it down, said this really isn't what's happening here. There's a self-love deficit essentially. Like so you really have to build self-worth. That's what we should be addressing. But how does someone, like if somebody's listening and they're like, okay, well, how do I know if I have self-love deficit? That that's an issue for me. What should I be looking for?
So because my mind is scientific, I was just kind of born with it. It's like I need things to fit. I need things to be in order. I need things to be explained or are explainable to make
Hmm.
sense. I created this pyramid to explain the basic building blocks of self-love deficit disorder. And you can see that so if someone just Googles the SLDD pyramid, Rosenberg, you can see it on YouTube, Google, wherever. I have all sorts of places I explain it. But at the very bottom, at the foundation of the pyramid is attachment trauma. That is the experience of being raised as a child by one narcissistic parent and often a codependent parent, parent who has self-love deficit disorder. And that is traumatic because a child has to mold themselves into what they believe the narcissistic parent wants them to be and has to avoid what the parent doesn't want them to be. And that is very traumatic on the developmental process, the developmental period of time. And from there arises core shame. Is this fundamental belief that I am not lovable, I'm not good enough, I'm fundamentally broken in some way. And that infects everything. And from core shame is what I call pathological loneliness, which is an existential disease. It is a condition of pain, sometimes bone aching body pain, of feeling lost in your world when you are alone and not in a relationship. It is not normal loneliness. It's loneliness crack. It is a really painful situation that all SLDs, codependents, have in
Mm.
between relationships. And the next stage or the next part of the pyramid is the codependency or SLDD addiction. It's the compulsive need to escape the pain of loneliness and the need of a relationship. It is almost like an addiction. And every SLD that I know will talk about the shame, we'll talk about the loneliness, and we'll talk about the pain and the discomfort of in between relationships, of not being in relationships. And then at the very top of the pyramid are all the traits, and they're varied and various of what people are, what we consider a codependent or someone with SLDD. And those vary by personality type.
And I know in your book you break those down beautifully. So if anybody wants to like look at those traits even more, what are the maybe the top two or three, or is there top two or three of those personality or those typical traits that you tend to see?
So it's funny how this all started. It all starts with my own introspection. What's wrong with me, Ross?
Hmm. I think
Why
that's where
am I
most of us start if we get into this work.
why do I keep falling in love with what becomes a soulmate, as my dad would
Mhm.
say, would end up as a cellmate? Why did I keep
Mm.
doing this, even though when I promised myself I won't? And so I come up with these explanations, and they little by little put together these ideas that would create my first books of the human magnet syndrome and later be expanded for the codependency revolution. And so in the beginning, I remember reconciling, excuse me, I remember having a problem with my theory and it scared me. I knew someone in my family that was a codependent, but also acted like a narcissist. And I remember
Mm.
thinking, oh my God, my theory doesn't work. And because this a cousin of mine, um, the husband was definitely a narcissist. He was, a grandiose narcissist. And she was manipulative and controlling and dishonest. And I thought, well, back then I thought, well, that's a narcissist too. And so then I said, I think I just proved my human magnet syndrome doesn't work. And I thought about it. I thought about it. And that's about when I started to come up with the idea that the explanation, the definition that a codependent gives all the LRCTP, doesn't receive and stays in a relationship. Well, this cousin did that. She took care of him. She took care of the kids. She takes care of everyone, but yet she's
Mm.
controlling, a little bit pushy. When it comes down to her relationships, she's always second. And I thought, well, it's a personality type. So that's when I came up with the idea of a active codependent. And immediately after that idea, I came up with a passive codependent. And the passive codependence, for people who are as old as I am, might remember a TV show called All in the Family and Edith Bunker. But it's passive, let's not fight, let's all get along. Come on, let's just apologize. And they're always trying to keep everyone together and trying to avoid relationship catastrophe or disintegration.
Yeah.
They're the nice, sweet ones. They're the salt of the earth. My grandpa Chuck was a passive codependent. My cousin, she controlled everything. Now she would fit the original definition of codependency. She controlled things, but yet could
Mm.
not control it. So it was active codependent, passive codependent, and then the third one I came up with was anorexic codependent. Because as we understand anorexia, an anorexic in their mind quits eating with this idea that they can control themselves. They live in a world where they have no control, and the control that they feel is the control of their body. And of course, we know that doesn't work out well for them. Well, someone who is a codependent or an SLD who has no control over their attraction to these harmful, damaging narcissists can finally just give up intimacy, give up sex, give up romance completely, disassociate from this part of the human nature. And when they disconnect from it, disassociate, they're not going to be in a relationship with a narcissist, but they're also going to rob themselves of the potential for intimacy. And I call that anorexic codependency.
It sounds like that could look like avoidance also.
Yeah, well, avoidance, they all the codependents will avoid bad things, but what is their core personality, the inner drive of being with someone who feels right, is trips them up. It's the broken picker.
Yeah.
So no, I don't know any codependent that starts off a relationship happy to be with a narcissist who is going to pick a narcissist. They might say, I like the bad boys, or I like the sexy, domineering women, or and that might be their type. And but no one chooses to be with a narcissist. That's a part of the unconscious
Hmm.
matching of relationship templates.
Yes, which is why it's so important that we bring this to light. And I think that's the work a lot of times I do with clients as well. It's like it's not that you are at fault per se for getting in these relationships. It's not like you're just attracting narcissists and you're part of the problem here. But
Mhm.
we have to do the inner work of why do I keep allowing myself to be treated this way? Or why do I minimize toxic behaviors? Why do I think that I don't deserve better? Like, how do I keep getting
Right.
stuck in these relationships? What is it I need to heal so that I feel
Mhm.
like I have the capability of making a healthier choice that logically I know I want to make?
That's why psychotherapy is so important because this problem, as self-love deficit disorder, it's resistant to regular normal psychotherapy. It's
Mm.
resistant to someone's focus efforts to change. It's bigger than the problem sometimes because it comes from unconscious sources that have been disassociated. It comes from trauma, much like PTSD. The trauma is sequestered and placed offline in a part of our brain that we don't have conscious access to.
And I want to touch on that. So what kind of therapy people should be going into. But before we do that, I want to go back to something you said because I know that a lot of times I was just talking with some members of my healing program, Rewired for Resilience, about this
Mhm.
question of am I the narcissist? Like
Mhm.
maybe it's me or maybe I did some things too. So as you were describing, I believe the passive self-love deficit disorder kind of personality. I wonder if they are more likely than the others to wonder if they're narcissistic too, because they might see some controlling behaviors, but it's coming from a much different place. So how can we differentiate if someone's listening and reflecting like, okay, so am I just I have the self-love deficit, but I do engage in some perhaps controlling behaviors because of that versus am I a narcissist?
It's funny you bring that up because whenever someone contacts me, they have to fill out an intake form. And the
Hmm.
intake form is designed to try to figure out if they are a codependent or SLD.
Yeah.
But whenever, and it's, I would say maybe 15 to 20% of all SLDs sometimes ask, I think they wonder if they're a narcissist. Almost always when that happens, I will find out that there has been gaslighting or what we call projective identification. And gaslighting is when you purposely twist the codependent or the victim's mind to believe things that aren't true. You and manipulate the environment to prove it to them and show that they are disabled, defective, or not good enough so that they can rely on you, the gaslighter. Whereas projective identification, well, is someone who is identifying with the narcissist projections. And projection is one of these unconscious defense mechanisms that are part and parcel with narcissism. They can't see their own narcissism, but they see it in other people. They will see or project that people have these traits that they most hate about themselves. So that if a narcissist is out and someone's giving a lecture, they will like, oh, what a narcissist, and they'll go on and on about how narcissistic someone is. Well, they're really talking about themselves. And so when a narcissist tells the codependent uh, spouse, partner, that they're narcissistic, they're being selfish, well, and it's not gaslighting, then it's projection. And then if the codependent identifies with it or agrees with it, then it's uh, projective identification. Now they are agreeing with something that's not true.
So you have found too that this is a very common question that a lot of
Oh,
self-love deficit disorder people come with.
of course, because it's common and unfortunately very sad that a controlling narcissist has to make the has to make the person with self-love deficit disorder feel bad about themselves
Yeah.
so that they have more power, more leverage over them. And if they ask to do things, say go out with some friends or to take a day off and ask the narcissist to watch the kids, the narcissist, of course, being selfish, is going to say no, but will use projection by saying you're being selfish. Or we'll use gaslighting, saying you're being selfish. And the thing about when it's gaslighting, they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's a manipulation technique. And so it's common. And almost always when I explain it to my clients, it's like this big, big sigh of relief. People who are narcissistic don't reach out for help
Hmm.
normally. Some do. They don't want psychotherapy. They don't want to talk about their problems. They don't want to tell people they have problems. So the idea of saying, I think I'm a narcissist and I feel bad about it in itself proves they're not narcissistic because they want help for it. They
Right.
want to do something about it.
Yeah. To a narcissist, everybody else is the problem. If you all
Yeah,
people would just get in line, then I would be fine. Like it's the one
exactly.
disorder where everybody else suffers more than the one with the disorder. Not that, narcissism is also a personality trait that people can have, but it's not what I have also found too for people who ask that question, survivors, A, they're
Mhm.
really concerned about it. And if you're really concerned about it and you really don't want to be doing that, to your point, a lot narcissists are not thinking that. Narcissists, if they ever happen to find themselves in therapy, it's usually because of um, what's the word? Like an ultimatum that they're being given,
Mhm.
usually by somebody else. They're going to lose something that they really value, and that's why they end up in therapy. But for codependents, as you would call them, self-love deficit people, they sometimes nobody else is saying anything to them. There's no ultimatum. They just don't like how life is going. They're unhappy with it, or they want to make sure that they're not being narcissistic or they're not being controlling. And I found a lot too that if you do find yourself like doing all the things and feeling controlling, it's usually because you've had to take up all the slack because a narcissist isn't engaging in the relationship at all. Like you said, a self-love deficit person will, give all the care, all the respect,
Right.
all the love in the relationship with hopes to get it back. So if you also find that you're doing all the things and somebody's calling that controlling, it might also be because they're benefiting from you doing all the things.
Exactly. And they want you to feel bad about it.
What kind, as you were saying, like typical traditional therapy doesn't work. So if you are identifying with the self-love deficit, what kind of therapy should you be searching for?
Well, it's one of the reasons I created what I call my self-love recovery treatment program, um, um, because it addresses all the fundamental aspects of self-love deficit disorder or codependency. And my brain has never thought about problems according to one theory or one technique. I've always, as a psychotherapist, used a little bit of everything. And so if someone is going to seek help and it's not from me or from you, is to find someone who understands that understands trauma is trauma informed. And it's not
Yes.
someone who practices EMDR. I mean, that's a part of it, but that's only a part of it. That doesn't make someone trauma informed. Someone who understands um, codependency developmentally, who understands that this is a problem of a developmental breaking. Someone
Yeah.
who, when they were a child and they were raised by parents who were supposed to nurture them and to build qualities and abilities, instead they crushed, and who can understand that because that feeds into the trauma part, to understand addictions. Because when you have a client who says, I can't leave, the or the pain of loneliness is just too much, and you have to get them through what I call SLDD withdrawal symptoms. The addiction model helps a lot. Someone who understands family systems, which basically is a theoretic model that says how people behave, especially problematically, is related to their role in the family, and that they are one cog in uh, a greater system, and
Right.
that if you change one person, everything else changes. So it's understand um, how the SLD fits in their system and the powers that keep them um, aligned with these maladaptive and unhealthy belief systems. And then just really good, normal, caring, empathetic therapy,
Yeah.
counseling.
Yeah. Because we know that the therapeutic relationship is the, most consistent indicator of how good the therapy is, like what the outcome is.
Mhm.
That's the most important thing. But a lot of what you're describing reminds me of a lot of the work that I do with clients as well. We have to go back, figure out the role you played in your family. I use a lot of IFS, internal family systems parts work, which
Mhm. Yes.
is based on the idea of that we all have that internal system of parts. So you might feel like part of you wants to heal and grow, and then another part of you is scared of what that means, or part of you wants to people please, and then part of you feels the need to be perfectionistic. So we kind of explore that. And I think that really helps when you feel
Mhm.
stuck and you don't know what to do. A lot of times it's because you have two competing parts and you don't know
Mhm.
which to listen to. So we work through those kinds of things. But something else that I was curious about, do you think that so everyone who ends up in a relationship with a narcissist, I understand that self-love deficit disorder people are likely, as you talked about in your first book, the human magnet syndrome, to find them because you just have so much love to give. And of course, the narcissist is
Mhm.
willing to take it all. And that's what feels like not a but familiar toxic dance.
Right.
Have you found that everyone who's in a relationship with a narcissist is codependent, or can people also end up with narcissists and they have a healthy background?
if the relationship is created by chemistry, and that is the interacting unconscious connection of relationship templates. And relationship templates is basically the automatic unconscious feelings, expectations, and hopes that we have for a romantic partner. And if we grow up with attachment trauma, and learn to shape ourselves to other person's needs, and become secondary or become background, um, our relationship template, without knowing it's unconscious, is that love is when we don't ask for something or ask for much and we take care of someone else. That becomes drilled into them. And that the only love that they got was what they can give themselves or steal and take from other people, which isn't really love. And so they need to be front and center. They need to be everything. They have to be everything while struggling with being nothing. And so when a codependent and a narcissist meets, and this is part of my human magnet syndrome theory, there's an attraction of opposites. The caregiver is attracted to the care needer, like a tango dance. The leader needs someone who will follow. The person who enjoys dancing, who's the follower, needs someone who leads. Unconsciously, when we meet someone, whether it's on internet dating or at a party or a friend's house or even a wedding, a lot of people meet others there, and you feel like you have a crush on someone, you're attracted to someone, those relationship templates are activated. Something feels familiar, and what feels familiar is going to be paradoxically safe. When a codependent is with someone who likes to talk about themselves, who's domineering, who is the center of the party, that feels very compelling. That feels very attractive to them. And when the narcissist meets someone who's a wonderful listener, who's compassionate, who's empathetic, who does not judge them for all of what has happened to them, well, that feels like they hit the jackpot.
Yeah.
So really, it's this unconscious interaction of our relationship templates that is essentially chemistry. Because if you come from healthy parents and you had healthy attachment, your relationship template is going to be different. And when you meet someone who's healthy, you're going to meet that other person is going to like you because you're healthy. And then they come together with just like the human magnets. So, and the magnets are the North Pole and the South Pole are attracted to each other. Opposites attract. Well, codependent givers, narcissist takers are attracted
Yeah.
to human magnet syndrome.
Yes, that makes sense. And I'm smiling as you're describing that because I know some narcissists that I've been with, and I do think they thought they hit the jackpot at first because they're like, wow, this person judges me for nothing, gives everything over the top. Like, and I, was doing it from a very caring place, thinking that I'm investing in a relationship. And,
Right,
this person really did say, like, I've literally prayed for you. I think this is it. And they idealize you and put you on this pedestal until they realize, oh, you're not going to meet all my needs. Like, I'm actually going to have to show up in this relationship. This is hard
right.
work. Now you're not perfect. Now they start devaluing you and getting annoyed with you. So
Yeah.
that
And
is
and
the pattern.
and and that happens after the love cloud.
Hmm.
That there's a period of time where there's this, well, all humans experience, uh, what is the term, by Dorothy Tenoff, limerence, the the strong feelings of connection, attraction, familiarity, and we don't fight those, and we we and the codependent is going to fall victim to those, thinking they're in love, and the narcissist is going to feel they're in love, but that limerence only lasts so long. Anywhere, usually it's between 1 and, if you're lucky, 6 months. But for codependent and narcissist, it's usually sometimes it's a month or two. And by that time, when the narcissist's true colors come out, the codependent is stuck in a relationship that is all too familiar with them, and they'd rather be in the relationship for fear of being outside of it and being lonely and driven by this, fear of rejection and abandonment.
Right. And that core shame that I'm not good enough. So I better, like, this person's with me. This person seems to be interested. And so you don't feel good enough for the people that logically you want to be with. It's like you said, that it's not logically what you want to be with, but it's familiar, that type of narcissistic toxic person. So
Mhm.
there's a pull to that person, even though you don't exactly know why. But it's
Mhm. It
you,
just feels like love. It's the soulmate. It's
yeah.
the broken.
And limerence, for people who aren't familiar with that term, can you briefly just tell us about that?
A term that's created in the 70s by Dorothy Tennant that describes the human condition of when we meet someone we are attracted to, where we are matched up with, where we can't stop thinking about them. We want to be with them. We anticipate touch, the hear of their voice, the sound of their voice. Um, we don't sleep as well. We don't eat as much. We just become consumed with this almost temporary, intense feeling of OCD.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for describing that. So I want to spend a few minutes talking about, now that we have an understanding of self-love deficit, you can see some of the signs and symptoms that maybe you resonate with, that attachment wound, the core shame, the pathological loneliness, just the intense loneliness, and
Mhm.
therefore you try to fill that with a relationship. So really building self-worth is like the essential component of overcoming this, because ultimately healing, so that you no longer find yourself in narcissistic relationships attracted to narcissists. You're changing your relationship template, who you're attracted to. So how does building self-worth ultimately protect you and help you avoid narcissistic relationships?
Well, self-worth is not built directly. For example, if someone is an SLD and they have all of the trappings of self-love deficit disorder, they have the background, the experiences, the history, um, they don't have self-worth. They don't have self-love. And if you go to traditional psychotherapy that focuses on self-worth and none of what is underneath it that is going to sabotage it, it becomes nothing more than band-aid work. So if you focus on the structural components, the under the hood parts of SLDD or codependency, the trauma, the core shame, the loneliness, the addiction, and the various other elements and that and there are many that that are part of this disorder. What happens is their self deficiency starts to neutralize one step at a time, one little bit at a time. It becomes less and less and less. And then there's this magical moment that they start to experience self-love.
Mm.
And it doesn't come in just one big epiphany, one big grand moment. It happens little by little. And once that starts to take root, it becomes what I call infectious in a positive way. The person doesn't want to get rid of it. They don't want to lose it. And they build upon it. And the next thing you know, they're feeling more and more self-worth. So it is important for us as psychotherapists is to encourage self-worth, is to try to model self-worth, but we also have to find psychological elements that undermine a person's application of that. Because you can teach someone, look in the mirror and say 10 positive things, and they will. But then later they go out and do something, they're calling themselves an idiot and no one loves me. And that's automatic. Or they're being gaslit or something like that.
Right. Yeah. I know I get frustrated with the toxic positivity kind of mindset
Yeah,
of just think your way to positive
yeah,
self-esteem,
that's
just
obvious. It's one of the hardest things that I've had to do. It's so important to think positively. So I don't want to say that's BS. Cognitive behavioral therapy or whatever is involved in to help people understand that the way you think sometimes controls the way you feel and the way you act. And so that's really important. But you can't do that. You can't do like this CBT work on top of a person who hasn't really done the other work because it doesn't stick. It doesn't last.
And that other work you're referring to is healing the attachment, dealing with the core shame, the
The
pathological
addiction,
loneliness.
yeah, and yes. And so it's one of my big challenges that I've gotten really good at. Okay, I'll say better at is controlling my negative thoughts because I'm at a place in my life where it's colored by self-love abundance. I love myself.
Mhm.
I feel good about myself. I don't need a relationship in order to feel in touch with my life, my needs, my identity. And so it's the best time to work on things like that because I don't have a countervailing force trying to push them down and disqualify them or neutralize them.
Yeah, because I think if you don't address those core things, you could be trying to build self-compassion, self-worth, self-esteem, and then it's like you trying to fill in a cup with a hole in the bottom.
Yes, that's a really good and not thinking you have a hole and you just keep filling it, filling it, and just not wanting to do the repair, and you never get out of it.
Right. So if you find yourself continuing in therapy, you're reading the books, you're doing the self-esteem workbooks, you're going to support groups, but it's almost like you're afraid to slow down because you know if you slow down, that loneliness or that shame is going to catch up with you. Then
Hmm.
that likely means deeper work needs to be done.
Absolutely.
That makes sense. I often help my clients, like you said, affirmations. It is important that we're aware of
Oh,
what
yeah,
we're thinking,
absolutely.
metacognition, thinking about your own thoughts.
Absolutely.
You have to recognize like what you're thinking and how that's impacting you. But I always say affirmation with action. Your brain is going to say, you're lying. If you just say, I have self-worth, I feel good about myself.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I'm I'm confident. You can't just say those things or the brain will say, well, you're lying. But can
Mhm.
you place action behind that? Can you do something that you could feel proud about, that you could gain confidence with? And then you can say, so, well, I have action behind this affirmation. I'm not just trying to trick myself. I'm not just lying to myself. And like you said, that can snowball into over time, you build self-esteem and self-worth because you are
Mhm.
acting differently. So you don't feel
Mhm.
like you're lying to yourself anymore.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much. You've given us so much wisdom. So I always end the podcast just asking if you could give someone one piece of advice to help them start restoring their resilience, what would that be?
Well, there's a saying, and I always get it wrong, and I'm going to try to get it right. It's by Anais Nin. And then time comes when the fear of there's more to lose from the fear of being closed down and protected than the risk of opening up and blossoming.
Mm,
It's it's the idea that we have so much to learn and gain from fighting whatever is controlling us that keeps us from being happy, keeps us from trying to live our life and to be fulfilled versus just hunkering down and being protected and just avoiding the problems and confusing that as happiness.
yeah. And overcoming that initial resistance to just getting in there and healing, that's the biggest struggle. But once you start,
Mhm.
the outcome far or the benefit far outweighs the fear of just starting. We just have to take the first step.
Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me. I know people are gonna take so much from this, so thank you again.
Well, if you can let people know that if you want to know more about me or what I do, just go to selfloverecovery.com, selfloverecovery.com, or shoot me an email at help@selfloverecovery.com. And thank you
Wonderful.
so much. Thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed talking with you, and I hope we do this even more. And
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll put all that in the show notes.
well, thank you.
Thank you so much again, Ross, for providing so much great insight and teaching us how loving ourselves is the key to breaking the cycle of toxic relationships. And as always, I want to remind you that no matter where you are on your healing journey, resilience can be restored, and we'll keep building it together. I'll see you in the next episode.